Welcome back to DC. I get to say something today that I've been waiting to say for almost 13 years. And that is, as we are all gathering today, we are officially in a ceasefire with the federal government. The work that you have all done over the last decade has paid off, and we are no longer a marginal issue in this country. Every agency, federal agency, has had to address us over the last few years. Every agency is talking about how we are going to be served by our federal government and how we are going to end the conflict between state and federal law for medical cannabis. Pretty amazing. I have to say, it's a very interesting thing to be a winner. I mean, I'm hoping you guys have kind of put that on a little bit, because you walk a little different. You feel a little different as you're engaging in society, and one of our goals has been to make sure that people who need this medicine, the only time that they're aware that they're a medical cannabis patient is when they're taking their medicine, right? They shouldn't be worrying about it when they're looking for their medicine, after they receive their medicine, worrying about their supply of medicine, and we are very close. But now that we are inside and people are having the conversation, it's not just enough to say, are you supportive of medical cannabis or not? And a lot of what we're going to be talking about at this conference are the details of winning, right? It's not just federal government backs off and we get to do whatever we want. That's not quite how this works. Winning means that we are no longer marginalized, that we're no longer producing and providing our medicine in the dark. But it means that we're now part of society, which has laws and regulations. And for many of you, you're working on your first medical cannabis law. There's actually people from 41 states here this weekend. That's really amazing. And a lot of you are here because of scholarships, because of some of our major sponsors. So I just want to make sure to thank Dr. Bronner's, Dioscorides, and Grace Analytics that are why many of you are here today. But this weekend and leading into Monday, obviously we're going to have a lot of time to meet each other, to inspire one another. But we're also really preparing for the next phase. Right now we are in a ceasefire. We have not won, right? We still have work to do. But because of a lot of the work of the people in this room, we have introduced our first Senate bill. When you go to Capitol Hill on Tuesday, you're not going to be asking senators to please think about maybe one day thinking about legislation. You're going to be asking senators to sign on to a piece of legislation that is going to make medical cannabis a reality for everyone. And I just want to say this is like a family reunion. Many of you, I spent a lot of my time traveling around and seeing all of you. So seeing you all come to DC, it means a lot to me. Some of you I've met at legislatures. Some of you I've met at public libraries, where I've been doing public speaking. And it really says a lot about our movement. That a lot of the work that I've done at Americans for Safe Access was I really just put out a rally cry and said, you know what, this medicine works for me, and I know it works for millions of others, and let's find our place in society. So I want to thank all of you for stepping up and being a part of this change that is changing millions of lives. When we started Americans for Safe Access in 2002, there were 40,000 legal medical cannabis patients in the country. There were 12 dispensaries, and there were 8 states that had laws that really only were criminal exemptions for possession. And today we have over 2 million legal medical cannabis patients, and that's a conservative estimate by far. We have 23 states that have functioning programs that are distributing medical cannabis to patients or preparing to. And we now have another now 16 states that have passed CBD laws. So this nation is having a conversation about medical cannabis. And the reason this nation is having a conversation about medical cannabis is because of the work that you're doing in your communities. I was on the road a couple weeks ago and turned on a show called Celebrity Apprentice. I don't know if you've ever seen this. It's a very silly show. But Donald Trump kept saying, over 12 years, we've raised $15 million. And I was thinking, well, you know what? Over 12 years, my members have raised $15 million, and we don't have Geraldo Rivera. So, so I just want to thank you all. Every time that we send out a request for funds to continue to do the lobbying work we do, that you answer that cry. When we ask you to call your legislators, that you answer that cry by calling those legislators or showing up at the offices. And when we've asked you to come here to DC to help us create a ceasefire and now to move forward to end this war once and for all, you all have come through. So the next 2 years are going to be important. I think we hear everybody, I'm sure you all have heard this, that the momentum is behind us, there's no stopping us now. And I'm going to invite people to think a little bit more about that. Because momentum actually means that something is going in a set direction with no needed force. Is that where we are right now? No. I would actually suggest that we are in a pinball machine. And I'm not even sure who's playing most of the time, to be honest. But the great news is that we, over the years, have learned a lot. We haven't just been sitting on the sidelines saying, please figure out a way to bring us this medicine. Instead, we've been engaging with organizations like the American Herbal Products Association to create good manufacturing practices for this industry. We've been working with the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia to put out a monograph so that we can have a much more intelligent conversation about this plant, a little higher than buds and stems. And we've been working with doctors we're finally seeing good medical education that we've all known would come. So this weekend, I want you to all put on your winning coats. I really invite you to embrace the successes that we've had and spend this weekend preparing and making sure you have the tools to finish this fight when you come home. So have a great conference, and we're going to jump into our first speaker. And the first speaker on this panel is actually a hero of mine. I actually don't think that my doctor would have known to mention cannabis if it hadn't been for the work of Alice. So Alice, come get us started.
Well, thank you, Steph. Thank you, everybody. It wasn't just me, of course. It was my husband, Robert Randall. Does Robert Randall need an introduction? Do I need to go through that? Robert was the first individual in the country to gain legal medical access to marijuana way, way, way back in 1976. That was 40 years ago, which really gives me some pause. Believe me, I'm a pioneer. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. And I really, I love the theme of this meeting. Wellness is winning. I love that. And I've kind of worked it into my remarks here today. Robert and I did have some good experiences with winning. There was not only his medical necessity defense, which established the concept of medical necessity, which is still used by many patients today. Most recently in Florida, Jesse Treblecki was found not guilty by reason of medical necessity by a jury of his peers. That was the first jury, yeah. And there have been other patients, Elvie Musica, Barbara and Kenny Jenks, numerous other patients who have used the medical necessity defense to gain access to medical marijuana. But Bob and I had some other victories that I just wanted to share with you. Between 1978 and 1981, there were 34 state laws passed in this country that recognized marijuana's medical value and that sought to establish statewide programs of research and access, compassionate access for their citizens. Now, if you're one of the many people who think that the state laws began in 1996, I would suggest to you that you do your homework, because if that's what you think, you're not going to be a very good advocate when you go to speak with your legislators and with people in your community. You have to know the history of your movement in order to be an effective advocate. And those laws were really, they steamrolled upon us. New Mexico was the first state. Yeah, okay. And, you know, they're important because, honestly, if the federal government hadn't roadblocked those laws, we would have had substantial research and we would have answered the question that only the federal government doesn't seem to be able to answer, which is whether marijuana has medical value or not. Of course it does. So the state laws were big wins for us, and so I wanted to share that with you. The other is the 1988 DEA rescheduling case called In the Matter of Marijuana Rescheduling. That was, at the time, Bob and I had a group called the Alliance for Cannabis Therapeutics, and we became the lead party in that particular case. And again, if you don't know your history, quick wrap up here. Francis Young was the judge, and he did rule that marijuana had medical value and should be rescheduled. Now, that ruling was overruled by the DEA administrator of the time, a gentleman by the name of John Lawn. And Mr. Lawn, in a particularly vociferous statement, said that those of us involved in accessing or advocating marijuana for medical use are nothing more than snake oil salesmen, and that we are perpetrating a cruel hoax on the American people. Now, that really stuck in my craw, because, you know, if there's anybody who's perpetrating a cruel hoax on the American people, it is the DEA, you know? So, you know, and that was 20 years ago. How many lives how much suffering has gone on because of the federal government? I mean, it's, anyway, I digress. Let's get back to wellness. Wellness is winning. And I believe that probably that referred to the endocannabinoid system. What a tremendous discovery. What an unheralded discovery that is. I mean, I know everyone in this room knows about it, but, you know, we've really got to do a better job about getting this information out to the general public, because it's huge. I have no doubt it will go down in history as one of the major discoveries of the late 20th century. It was just huge. And I feel it moves the marijuana debate into a different plane. Now, marijuana reform has always been a civil rights issue. But with the discovery of the endocannabinoid system and with the research that's going on in Europe and Latin America and Israel, with the things we're discovering, it's moving marijuana into an issue of biological rights, not only civil rights. And just as in Roe v. Wade we established the right of a woman to control her body, I think the endocannabinoid system is going to give some lawyers some interesting ways of arguing cases. Now, I don't know if that's going to be next year or 5 years or when, but I do see it coming. It's inevitable. Cannabis is a nutritional substance that all of us need, one way or another. Our bodies are designed to take it in. It helps us regulate our body. It's a biological right that we should be able to use this. So that's one observation that I've made. But just as, excuse me, I'm kind of like Marco Rubio. I have this dry mouth problem. You know, okay, just as civil rights, the discrimination didn't go away because of civil rights, right? Civil rights laws were passed in the early 1960s, and there was still plenty of racial discrimination. Similarly, with cannabis reform, as we win, whatever that is, I mean, I could ask each of you in this room what winning is, and I think I'd get dozens of different answers. All of us are approaching this in a slightly different way. So winning is kind of amorphous. And there will never be, at least in my estimation, the one big win. There will be big wins, but the one big win, I don't know really even what that is, you know. But even if it happened tomorrow, if you know, the magical dust was sprinkled upon the land here in Washington, and Barack signed an executive order and marijuana was legalized tomorrow, the discrimination against cannabis would still be with us. And that's our problem for the next decade or two, because it's serious discrimination. In fact, in many cases, it's bigotry. You can't put it any other way. There is unreasonable hatred towards this plant that we call cannabis. And, well, let me give you a very good example just from 2 weeks ago. Up in New York City, the mayor, Mr. de Blasio, and his police commissioner, Mr. Bratton, are having a little tiff. Mr. de Blasio feels that his police department should not waste its time and money arresting people for small amounts of marijuana. Mr. Bratton disagrees. And he held a press conference 2 weeks ago, and he started talking about the homicide rate in New York City. Between January 1 and March 1, 54 people have been murdered in New York City. Last year, during the same period, 45 people were murdered. And you want to know the reason for the increase? Marijuana. Seriously. This man said, in this city, people are killing each other over marijuana. That is the police commissioner of New York City in 2015. I mean, it's like Harry Anslinger came up from the grave again. Seriously. I mean, you know. So that's not only an indication of discrimination, but it's also bigotry. It turns out that Mr. Bratton wrote his memoir a few years ago. And in it, he lamented hippiedom, Woodstock, the drug culture, the style of dress. He recalled peers who wore beads, smoked marijuana, and listened to anti-war rock and roll while he served in Vietnam. Well, this is an angry man. And he's obviously transferred his anger onto an innocent plant called cannabis. But this man is not alone. I came across this kind of bigotry last fall as I was in Florida campaigning for Amendment 2. It was everywhere in Florida. There are many of you who live in nice little bubbles of medical cannabis, legal medical cannabis. You have no idea what's going on in the rest of the country, but it's not pretty. And I encountered some really ugly situations in Florida. The discrimination is there, and the closer we get to winning, the uglier it's going to get. So you need to be prepared for that. You need to learn your history. So you can argue with these people, and argue is not the right term, so you can discuss with these people, because if you get into an argument, you've already lost. You need to present the facts. You need to present them over and over and over again. Those people who have mislearned facts will learn, and they'll change their minds. I saw that in the senior centers I went to. The bigots will never learn. The only thing that will get rid of them is a generation change. So we're in this for the long haul, folks. 40 years from now, there could be another Alice up here looking out at all these people and going, oh my gosh, 40 years? But I'll tell you what, I hope the theme at that time also is wellness is winning, because I feel like a winner being here and seeing what we started 40 years ago, not anticipating, but just because we had to do it, because it was the right thing to do. Because truth will win out if you keep speaking it over and over again. So keep on talking the truth, keep on keeping on. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Larry Bedard, a retired emergency physician, and I guess the next speaker up. I'd like to thank Don Duncan and Steph for the invitation to come to your conference. If I can get the slides up. I do have some PowerPoint slides. You know, in medicine, one of the ways they define an expert is a physician from out of town who has slides, so I guess this makes me an expert here. One of the fundamental principles of a physician is do no harm, and I think based on that, we're starting to win the war in the medical community with increasing support for physicians' use of medical cannabis. And there is a role for all of you to play, because I can tell you your average physician is almost completely ignorant about medicinal marijuana. 90% of physicians, I believe, have never heard of the endocannabinoid system. Most of them who have think it's a brand of marijuana. See, how do I switch? Up. I don't know how to move the slides. All right. I've got a lot of slides, so I'm going to go through them quickly. It looks like Alice and I are both veterans of the war on drugs. This war has been going on since 1970, when President Reagan signed into law the Controlled Substance Act. Whoop. How do I go back? Well, when he started the war on drugs, you obviously need some volunteers. You need to have an army. The first guy to step up was the king. Rather an ironic picture. Gets a badge. Well, you don't have enough people who are going to volunteer for the war, so you had to start drafting people. And I was coerced into joining the Navy by President Nixon. So I've been a lieutenant commander in the war since 1971. In 1968, after things were going bad in Vietnam, they started drafting physicians. Every other year, they would draft virtually 100% of physicians. So about this time, I got a notification report to Oakland for my pre-induction physical. However, Dr. Bedard, if you wanted to become a specialist, you could enlist, do training as a psychiatrist, and then instead of a general medical officer in Vietnam, you could go in as a psychiatrist. Hoping the war would be over, I opted for the Berry plan, thought I'd be a psychiatrist and the war would be over. Other options, you enlist, maybe you get a better duty, you could go to Canada, or you could go to jail. Neither one of those was appealing. To give you an idea just how fucked up this program was, I am getting promoted as a lieutenant commander. Now that's Captain Moore. He was in charge of the program. Christian Scientist fighter pilot. So the Navy decided this was a personnel problem. This was not a medical problem. Being a good Christian Scientist and All-American every Friday, depending on the season, we would have either a football game, a baseball game. The captain would provide 3 cases of beer. All of our patients would get shit-faced drunk and start partying for the weekend. What were we treating? In retrospect, we were treating probably PTSD, a term that never existed at the time, which is now a growing indication medicinal marijuana helps with PTSD. And then actually the Cory Booker, Rand Paul law would allow VA physicians to recommend medicinal marijuana. Essence of the war on drugs, Schedule I drugs, no medical use. We can all read that. 2 years after the law was passed, they were supposed to do a scientific study and consider rescheduling marijuana. They published Marijuana, the Signal of Misunderstanding. Here's what this commission, known as the Sherer Commission, conservative Republican governor from Pennsylvania, recommended legalization of marijuana. Basically, you could possess up to an ounce in private. If you got caught with public, they confiscated it. I think all of us could live with this in this day and age. President Nixon basically threw it into the trash can, never read it, because the war on drugs was really a war on drug protesters. We all have a right to protest the Vietnam War, but you didn't have a right to smoke a joint and protest the Vietnam War. So this is what J. Edgar Hoover and Richard Nixon really went after, people who opposed the war. I went to, the best thing about being in the Navy, I started as an emergency physician, ended up as a first board certified physician in Marin County. I've always been involved in medical politics, became president of our national association, our state association, and have been a delegate to the California Medical Association. After I retired, I had enough courage actually to address the issue in the medical community, and this is a resolution I wrote in 2009 asking the CMA to support the legalization of marijuana. At that time, Dale Geiringer tracked down the author, and I got involved in the 2010 initiative and got heavily involved, I guess, in. So what happened, that didn't pass. But in 2009, the California Medical Association declared that prohibition was a failed public health policy. It's not only a failed public health policy, it's a discriminatory, unjust policy that needs to be repealed. So I think one of the takeaways is the political process may take some time. 2010, we had the Compassionate Use Act on the ballot, or legalization of marijuana on the ballot. I asked the CMA to support that. Instead, what they did is they set up a technical advisory committee, which I had the opportunity to sit on. Finally, in 2010, this is also had another resolution. Every major medical society in the country, the American Medical Association, California Medical Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, want marijuana to be rescheduled and studied. So this is a message. Virtually every physician in their organization support the rescheduling of marijuana. Went to practice in Marin County. We had 63%, very high rate of marijuana use in my county. Here's my experience in 20 years. Less than 10 patients, half of them were parents. You know, daughter says, gee, you know, Mary's mother smokes with her. Hey, Mom, try. 15 minutes later, Mom starts to, gee, can't breathe, get a little tightness in my chest, start to get numb, think I'm having a stroke, have a heart attack, call the ambulance, and they're basically having an anxiety reaction. Never admitted a single patient, no big deal. After I got involved, I was asked to speak at the American Society of Bioethicists. They had a conference, Is Legalization of Marijuana Ethical? I really turned it around because I think it's unethical for physicians not to support legalization. I looked in the AMA's Code of Ethics. First one says, in general, when physicians believe a law is unjust, they should work to change it. Prohibition is clearly unjust. 3.5 times as many, or to 4 times as many people of color get arrested. It is discriminatory. It's based on bigotry. This was one of the compelling arguments to the California Medical Association why they supported endorsement. The second thing, and I think this is where you become important, the Code of Ethics talks about the patient relationship, and you have a right to receive information about alternative care. The problem is most physicians have no idea what the uses of medicinal cannabis are for. I suggest to you, when you see your physician, have a copy, and I'll be happy to give you all my slides. Just ask me, and I'll send them to you. You should have a copy and say, doctor, I think I have a right to know the alternatives. Here's a presentation. ACEP develops a paper on various conditions, and you need to educate the physicians I think as physicians get more educated, they're going to do the right thing. Once again, ethical principles, you have autonomy, you have a right to self-govern, and you have the right to know what the alternatives are. This is one of the conservative heroes, and I think he summed up what's wrong with prohibition. Clearly does much more harm than it does good. It's time this law be changed. First step is to decriminalize, which we did in California. I think it's really outrageous that people, 600,000, still get arrested, go to jail, get criminalized. This is our governor. We signed decriminalization in California a couple years ago. But I think that's a first step. And finally, as Albert Einstein, all of us are aware that insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over. As you had the police lieutenant talking in that area, rather insane policy. Let me just give you what I think are a couple of takeaways. One is you, I think, have a role to play to educate physicians about medicinal marijuana. They have an ethical responsibility to learn about it and to know what alternatives are. Two, the legislative process. It takes time. It took 3 years to get the California Medical Association to support legalization. Frequently, when you see legislation, I also think you see where the perfect is the enemy of the good. To quote Mick Jagger, the philosopher, you can get what you need, you can't always get what you want. And I think a lot of legislative initiatives is people want the ideal and the perfect, but don't let that be the enemy of the good. Thank you, and looking forward to meeting you. I'll be here through the rest of the conference. Appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all, those of you that I know and those of you that I have not yet met. So I'm waiting for my slides to come on, but I'll just introduce myself quickly. So I'm Amanda Reiman. I work for the Drug Policy Alliance. I also am very honored to teach at UC Berkeley, go Bears. And I have been, there we go. So I have been working in the area of cannabis for going on 14 years, but I've been a medical cannabis patient for over 20 years. So I learned about the benefits of this plant before I moved to California and really became an activist around the use of this plant. So what I'm here today to talk about is, does access to medical cannabis make everything more dangerous and horrible for those around you? Spoiler alert, the answer is no, it does not. But I want to put this in the context of a survey that just came out in California a few days ago that was done by the Public Policy Institute of California and was asking folks about their opinions on legalization, because we're looking at legalization in California in 2016. And not surprisingly, among those who had ever used marijuana, 75% supported legalization, right? Among those that had never used cannabis before, only 35% supported legalization. And what that tells me is that for folks that have never used cannabis, that don't know about cannabis, there still is this fear that other people's cannabis use is going to somehow negatively impact their life. And that's usually brought out by our opponents, right? And talking about how it makes things more dangerous, how it makes kids more likely to use it, how it makes the roadways more dangerous. And then they say, and we don't know what's going to happen because this is a brand new experiment and we have no idea and we just really wait and see. And I'm here to tell you that we have a really good idea of what access to cannabis does to public health. So I really appreciated Alice's history lesson, and I just want to give a little bit more context to this. Okay, so this is not to scale, but this is to give us an idea about the comparison from which cannabis was looked at as a medicine compared to its history as an illegal recreational drug. So from about 3000 BC to about 1937, cannabis was a medicine. It was nothing else but a medicine. It was used across cultures, across the world as a medicine. From 1937 to about 1996, the public regarded cannabis as an illicit, dangerous, recreational substance. And then, with the passage of California's law in 1996, the public finally started to come around to thinking about cannabis back to where it had been since 3000 BC, which was as a medicine. So the use of cannabis is very old, and the history of cannabis as a medicine far trumps its history as an illicit substance. But others would have you think that this is a brand new thing just coming out today. So we have our folks like Kevin Sabet. Now, I did not create this meme, I stole it, but I really like it because it is this sky is falling mentality. That no, if you open this up, if you allow people to have access to cannabis, the most horrific things you will ever imagine will happen. I mean, talk about being like Anslinger's mouthpiece. I mean, sometimes I think that he really conjures up that spirit when he's having these conversations. They tell us all of these horrible things that will happen if we allow people to have access to cannabis. And all the while, we're saying, look, we use this, we know what it does. This is not something new. This is not a new plant that we've invented just today. So in California, we are now celebrating 19 years of legal access to cannabis. I mean, that's almost 2 decades. And if you guys want to feel really old, which is so fun, because I didn't feel old enough when we talked about the 40 years since 1976, which is when I was born. I was giving a talk at Berkeley a few weeks ago to like 400 undergraduates. And I asked them to raise their hand if they had been born on or after 1996. And about half of them raised their hand. And what that means is that in California right now, we have a generation of adults who have never known anything but medical cannabis. They've grown up, I know, it's amazing. They've grown up with a dispensary on their corner. They've grown up with their parents and their parents' friends talking about how it helps their symptoms. They've probably grown up with a family member who's used it during a really serious illness like cancer or MS. And this is really a game changer because now it's becoming normalized. And so in California, because we have this open-ended list of conditions, we have a patient population that really is very representative of the general population in California, probably more so than in other medical cannabis states. And what this allows us to do is really look at the impact that we've had over the past 19 years and what has happened with some of those public health indicators. So that's what I'm going to present to you today. What do we know about public health indicators in California over the past 20 years? And scientists will tell you 20 years is a good chunk of time to know if something bad is going to happen. So let's take a look. All right, so let's look at crime. So we look at crime in 1996 versus 2012, which is the last year we have data available. And oh, look, crime did not skyrocket. We did not see it go through the roof. We did not see property crime go through the roof. We didn't see assault. We didn't see violent crime, the way they may say in New York is causing all these murders to happen. We haven't seen that. Now, can we say, oh, this is because of medical cannabis that we're seeing these reductions? Absolutely not. I'm not going to play the correlation causation game the way our opponents do, and I'm going to tell you, no. We don't know that this is because of medical cannabis. But you know what we do know? We know that these things didn't skyrocket after dispensaries started opening, after cultivation started happening, and after people in California started having access. So traffic fatalities. Again, we see between 2006 and 2010, alcohol went up slightly. Other drugs have remained stable. So again, we didn't see a huge spike in fatalities related to drugs and DUI after medical cannabis happened in California. And then what a lot of folks are concerned about is youth access to medical cannabis. So here we see 1996 versus 2008, which is the last year we have for the California Student Survey. We see that past 6-month cannabis use has gone down in every grade. So again, the concerns that all of a sudden youth use would skyrocket if we allowed medical cannabis just has not panned out. But it's about more than just the prevention of harm, because we know that public health isn't just related to the drugs that people are using. Public health is related to whether those people in your community can get jobs, whether they can have housing, whether they can keep their children with them, whether they have access to organ transplants. All of these things promote the public health of a community. So we need to think not just about how cannabis can heal, but how cannabis can repair some of these problems. How can the newly forming cannabis industry address these issues to improve public health? So I want to talk a second about ensuring equity. When we look at California, there are about 13,000 cannabis arrests in California in 2012, and these individuals are overwhelmingly young, male, and people of color. And many people that have been working in the medical cannabis industry in states that have very sketchy laws, and in places in California that have very sketchy laws, have fallen victim to the criminal justice system while they're trying to provide medicine. And as we move forward, we cannot forget about these folks as well, because they helped build this industry, and they're the ones that we need to be a part of the new industry. So, in conclusion, cannabis has existed in societies around the world for thousands of years, and yes, it is the very same plant you see in the dispensary today. And even among all of these claims of it's not your grandpa's weed and what is this crazy whack stuff, it is the same plant. It is the same process of taking the concentrates from the plant. It's the same marijuana plant as they had growing thousands of years ago across the world. The introduction of medical cannabis laws is not associated with negative impacts to public health, period. There's no caveat, there's no if-then, there's nothing. There's no evidence that medical cannabis laws are associated with negative impacts to the public's health. I just want to make that very clear. And finally, we really need to make sure that cannabis regulations can and should address not only the benefits of the plant, but the harms of prohibition by ensuring that those who have been most impacted have opportunities in this new industry. And there's a new organization called the Minority Cannabis Industry Association. I would recommend that folks check it out. Because I think that, as we move forward, there's a lot of opportunity here. And, the analogy I like to use is that, if we're all in the water and we're drowning and a boat comes to save us, but only half of us can get in, those of us that are lucky enough, and it is luck a lot of the times, to get in first, have a responsibility to make sure that the others are rescued as well. And not just say, well, I'm sorry, I'll go back to the land and make it better for you, and hopefully this won't happen again. We have a responsibility, and there's a lot of folks that are still in that water in California and across the country when it comes to medical cannabis. So we are definitely winning, and we're winning to a point where we can bring back that bigger boat, and we can get those folks in, and we can bring them to shore, and that is really exciting because it's an opportunity that I don't think we've had in the recent past. So it's been an honor, and it's been a pleasure to speak with you today. Really enjoy this conference. It's one of the best there is. Here's my information if you have any questions, and I hope to have an opportunity to speak to you all this weekend. Thanks.
Good morning. Good to see everyone. I know a lot of you from last year, and I'm meeting a lot of new people. It's been a great experience. Let me just advance. I'm going to try to coordinate two slide decks because of a little technical issue here. Let's just get this started. Okay. So last year I had the honor of being named Medical Professional of the Year by the Americans for Safe Access for my work in publishing medical marijuana education for healthcare providers. And the recognition has truly become one of my most meaningful recognitions throughout my career. And I think some of the things, or what makes this recognition so important and so meaningful, was that it meant so much to the patients, the work that we're doing in terms of educating doctors. And I realized after leaving the meeting last year, someone made the comment, was that meeting very different? You've never been to a meeting quite like that. And I realized the only difference was, not that it was any less academic or any less important in terms of the issues that we discussed. But what was different is that we had the opportunity to interact directly with patients. And the typical medical meetings we go to, we don't sort of see that end user, those people that we're really doing this all for. So it was incredibly meaningful, and it was great when I walked into the lobby just checking in yesterday to be greeted by so many people with these big smiles saying thank you, and we're so glad that you continue to do this work. So it was just a great, great experience. So since being here last year, I'm going to start off with a story that I told last year because I think it's very relevant. I think it ties in a lot of the things that we've heard. I told it last year. I asked Steph if I should do it again. She said, yes, go ahead, because it really does fit in. So though the title of my talk or today's presentation is Medical Marijuana, Establishing an Educational Resource Focused for Healthcare Providers and Patients, what it really should be called is the following. I don't know the answers to any of our 11-year-old son's medical marijuana questions. And this is the truth, so let me explain, okay? So these are some of the questions. So my son asked, what about carbon monoxide? That can't be good for you. Doesn't smoke produce cancer-causing chemicals? What if you write a prescription and your patient then has a car accident? Are you responsible? And what about secondhand smoke if there are children in the house? And you say, well, why was he, how did this come up? Well, my wife is also an anesthesiologist. We trained together, and she's now editor-in-chief of our website, which we'll discuss. We're discussing the new regulations and laws that were being proposed in Massachusetts. So this was the end of 2012. And honestly, I really never thought twice about medical marijuana, and I've never tried it even to this day. It just never really crossed my mind. But this discussion brought up a lot of issues. We started looking at the literature and discussing this. And when my son asked these questions, I realized this is really concerning. If my son, off the top of his head, at 11 years old, could ask me questions that I can't answer as a pain expert about this relevant topic, I'm really concerned about what the other doctors out there are going to be able to provide to their patients. So I thought about it. There's really going to be probably two sets of doctors. Those who know nothing about this and say just no to their patients, and those doctors who mean well, want to certify their patients, but really have no way of guiding their patients. I think this echoes some of the things that we've heard today. And then I also realized whether or not a doctor has any intention of being involved with this, patients are going to be appearing in his or her practice who will actually be using medical marijuana. So it's really imperative that they have an understanding of this. So what we decided to do, based on all of this, and the fact that medication cannot be looked up in the physician desk reference, the PDR, there are no inserts with the medication when you get it from the FDA, and there are no, you can't go to the pharmacy, Rite Aid, CVS, and get a package insert along with this medication. So we realized what is needed is comprehensive education. So by way of history, we made use of a website that I started back in 1998. So just by a little background, in 1998, I co-founded the Answer Page. It's a free educational resource that I provided for our residents and our fellows. And we were really pleased when we launched this that it resonated really well with the residents. I wanted to ensure that we had daily education for them. But the surprising thing that happened, in a very short time, without any advertisement, we found out Hopkins was linking to us, Harvard was linking to us, Stanford was linking to us. And then what was really, really meaningful to me and realized that we had to keep this going was we started getting thank yous from around the world. We're now read in about 120 countries, and we get these incredible thank yous saying you're helping educate the developing countries. We can't afford textbooks, but we use your site to learn something every day. And that really resonated with me because one of our mottos is learn something every day. That's the whole key. We wanted to make sure that we would always be providing daily education. And now, years later, we've given out over 100,000 hours, well over 100,000 hours of Category 1 CME, continuing medical education for doctors, and we have an international team of writers working with us. Then, just as an aside, we wanted to make it fun and interesting, and one of the things I learned to engage doctors and nurses is when we're on call, very often I hear the complaint, they're sitting at the computer playing games, and they say, well, I really should be doing my medical reading, but these games are so interesting. So what we decided to do is we came up with an idea to make the educational experience sort of fun and interesting. The test at the end of each educational content can either be a quiz or an interactive crossword puzzle. So that was one of the things that we've added. We also teach in a lot of different areas. We teach in areas that are quite relevant: risk management, opioid prescribing, pain management, and palliative care. So this all really actually tied very nicely together with the medical marijuana education. And then some really interesting things have happened. And this goes to what Steph has said about your organization, about all the work you've done. As I noted, I came into this relatively recently. It was really by chance because of my son's questions. And I don't know if I would have been involved with this had he not asked those questions and we really didn't take a focus. But all of you have been fighting this battle and getting us to where we are. So I've been very fortunate. I've been really just met with very positive responses, very welcoming responses, whether it's in academia, whether it's medical societies, whether it's from political groups. But you've really fought the battles and gotten us to the point where we are today. So some exciting things have happened. What I'm going to do is just discuss what has happened in the last year and then where we're going with this, and then I'll conclude. So one of the nice things that happened is the Mass Medical Society, one of the oldest and most respected medical societies in the country, is our joint sponsor of all our CME content. In fact, they co-branded our opioid abuse series, and now it's among one of their most popular courses. I'm really pressing the button. And then back in 2013, in January 2013, we wanted to be right in time with the law changing. We launched the medical marijuana education program on the answer page. And this also received very positive responses, both academically, even in the business press. I think this was Yahoo Finance that picked this up. And then what I was very pleased to see is that working with the Massachusetts Medical Society, they were very supportive of this effort, and they immediately started linking to us. In fact, if you go to the Massachusetts Medical Society back then and today, and you go look up medical marijuana, they link directly to our website. In fact, they invited us to their annual meeting, and they advised us to highlight what we're doing in this area, because there's really a new area for education for doctors, and they also realize how important it is. And these are some of the topics that we've included. And you can go to the site, it'll all be listed, plus we're launching many more, which I'll get to very shortly. Quite shortly. These are the other topics that we're launching. We have a whole international team writing, and in fact, next week we'll be launching 8 additional syllabus topics for another 12 hours of CME credit, and then this is going to be ongoing content development. So in terms of some of the other exciting things that have happened over the last year, just advance to this, is we had Dr. Mishulam. I sent him a letter, Dr. Raphael Mishulam, who's credited with the isolation and structure elucidation of THC, among other incredible work. I sent him an invitation to see if he would come and speak at our hospital, Brigham and Women's Hospital. And he was incredibly gracious, and he accepted the invitation. It was a great experience, and not only was it a great experience to have Dr. Mishulam there, Steph joined us, among others, and it was really a very meaningful experience. And it was so meaningful that I just have to point out a few people. I don't know if I have a pointer. Had my mom come right here on the right. My wife is right next to her, who is also the editor-in-chief of the answer page. Dr. Mishulam is in the center. The man all the way on the left is my dad, and then there's Mrs. Mishulam. And it was an incredible, I couldn't miss this. And what I found really exciting is that this was one of the first, if not the first, Grand Rounds presentations at a Harvard teaching hospital on the subject of medical marijuana. And it was incredibly well received right up to the top of the institution, and that's thank you. And that's despite the federal prohibitions. We even had a dinner with the heads of Partners Healthcare, the hospital system, Brigham and Women's Hospital, and they were really supportive and interested in what we were doing. And since then, we've gotten numerous requests for additional lectures and presentations throughout the hospital system. My wife, again, we were going off to dinner with Dr. Mishulam. And we've now developed an ongoing relationship. He has a great sense of humor. We email back and forth late at night, and just been a great experience. And he's also writing now for us. In fact, next week, we'll be launching his topic, an overview of cannabidiol, and that will be launched next week live. And in terms of the hospital system being very supportive, there's now an educational fund hasn't been endowed. It coincidentally has my name attached to it. It's the Stephen B. Cohen, the Massachusetts Alternative and Palliative Care Education and Research Fund. And I'm using those funds to work on research and developing educational programs within the hospital systems for doctors, residents, fellows, and medical students and other healthcare professionals. Thank you. And Florida was also mentioned. We were actually asked to write their course, and now we're the sole provider for the education in the Florida program in terms of their CME program. And I just want to touch on where I think we're going. And this was, I think, another very important article that came out this year. And it's legalization of medical marijuana and incidence of opioid mortality. And what's very exciting about this article, let me get to the conclusion, is it states it is also possible that for some, medical marijuana is a substitute for opioids as opposed to a gateway drug rather than an adjuvant. The potential protective role of medical marijuana in opioid analgesic-associated mortality and its implication for public policy is a fruitful area for future work. And what's exciting is when you think about where this is published. This is published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So I think we've come incredibly far in terms of our reach and input. And if you look at the anesthesia literature, which some of the articles are a bit less exciting to read, but the meaning is still there, it's now well within our literature. So for example, every month now I'm seeing articles focused on medical marijuana, the endocannabinoid system, and it's really very interesting, exciting that it's now in our literature. And I really think in terms of where we're going, that it's going to be in a few years the rare doctor who is not familiar with the endocannabinoid system as opposed to the way it is now. Because it's really having a stronghold in our literature. We're getting requests all the time for education in this area. And there's incredible receptivity to what we're providing. Let me just conclude here, if I can. So where we're going, realizing that doctor education and other healthcare provider education is incredibly important, we also realize it's incredibly important to provide patients, caregivers, and dispensary staff with education. Because there's limited time, even if in the ideal circumstance where a doctor is well-versed in this area, there's really limited amount of time in that doctor-patient interaction to fully inform a patient. So what we're doing in collaboration with the ASA and Steph is we're launching a cannabis care certification program that will provide comprehensive education, not just for doctors and other healthcare professionals, but also for patients, caregivers, and dispensary staff. And you'll hear more about this program probably throughout the weekend. And I think my 2 minutes are now up. So I'll end it there. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be here for the weekend. Thanks.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will also ask for my presentation to start. And I am CPC. I obviously am not Cannabis Patient Coalition. I can just resist to using this abbreviation in this typing. As I been told by Steph, it makes sense that I start with my introduction, and I can confirm that, okay, here it goes. Because probably contrary to the other speakers, none of you, or just few of you, knows what this tall guy with a strange accent is coming from. My name is Pavel Kabu. I've been born and living since in Prague, Czech Republic. And it's my first time I'm sharing with the audience like this my medical cannabis patient CV. You can read my professional in the books, but so let me start in 1993, where I had first experience with cannabis as such, and despite it might sound strange, it was one of the pros which make me, because at that time I was choosing after the secondary school which university to continue. I was already accepted for technical university, for economical foreign business university in Prague. But these experiences with the medical cannabis make me thinking why in the country where beer is cheaper than water in the restaurants, believe me, and of course no one takes care about 18 years age as the limit for serving alcohol. So during the secondary school, you can imagine that all of us youngsters or teenagers had a lot of experience with positive as well negative effects of alcohol. So why in such country is forbidden to grow and use cannabis, such harmful such unharmful flower. So then I started to study, and as I was learning more about human biochemistry and all this natural science related to medicine, I start my activism role, writing an articles on what the cannabis is really, what are the real benefits, what are the real potential risks, how it can be used in medical care. And it all took me to 1996, and I'm just seeing, I'm swapping the time shift, so you see it's really my first time presenting this type of CV. When I was diagnosed with allergic rhinitis, I recall that there is not just this dry mouth effect already mentioned by Alice, but the dry nose, or the effect which was stopping my running nose during the allergic season. It was really remarkable, and I didn't find any other legal medication helping me with these symptoms. So I can say that since that I was the medical cannabis patient, because obviously before I was just experimenting with cannabis. But after my graduation in 2000, the activist role get speed up, because that time we start to form with some of my colleagues a informal group which succeed to decriminalize possession up to 30 grams and growing up to 5 flowers for adult Czech citizens, which became legal in 2008. So after 4 years of work with members of parliament, with experts in this field. Then in 2009, I got the real diagnosis, I can say, for using a medical cannabis after the complication of my inguinal hernia operation, where my very good friend, very good surgeon, find out that I'm one of the 2% of population which is having unstandard flow of nervus cutaneus femoris lateralis, which he exactly hit with the screw he was mounting on the inguinal net. Obviously, he didn't know it, and when I woke up from anesthesia, he was apologizing since the reoperation after 3 months, when it helped to get off the most painful symptoms, which at that time was something like if you hit yourself in a leg with a fork. But after this removal, I stand just with some changes in my sensoric feelings from the half of my right leg. And then in 2011, we already started a medical cannabis petition. With that team, we already succeed with decriminalization, taking us in 2013 to establishing Czech patient coalition called COPAT. And then in 2015, all these efforts led to the establishment of International Medical Cannabis Patient Coalition. And I'm really pleased to be here. I'm really honored to say thank you, all of you ASA members, for what you are doing in US, in your communities, in your states, and having in mind also the outreach which it can have for the other countries, and also to thanks Steph, Jen, and the other ASA staff, how friendly they are helping the other patients trying to establish such structures in their country, to build and use the knowledge and the experience which you already gathered all together. So, in fact, this birth assistance of ASA during establishing of COPADs help us to be in 5 months in fully operational websites and the organization full of useful information for patients, translated and also content localized. Obviously, there are always some legislative differences which needs to be involved, not just simply translate the text, but anyway, all the work you are doing is really helping in the other countries as well. So once again, thank you very much. And finally now to the IMCPC. So that's the organization we started to think to establish in 2014 when there was a CannaFest. It's a cannabis fair which has been visited by many representatives of patient organizations, of course mainly from Europe. And so we set up a preparatory meeting together with Steph visiting that time Prague, and agreed that it makes sense to continue with this effort towards the 2015 March, when the Medical Cannabis Conference was held in Prague. And we succeed to get representatives of 15 countries in one room, and agreed on establishing this international cannabis patient coalition. Oh, well. I'll not be now reading all those objectives because I would better go in more details. I will just mention that obviously the third one, to create the website, it's already done, and you can check, or it's already in progress, and you can check it out on imcpc.org. What is the website? So yet another press? No. Well, maybe can just someone move it from the backwards? Thank you very much. These are the countries. Will try to go through all the abbreviations. Obviously, we have United States, we have Czech Republic, Bulgaria, France, Slovenia, United Kingdom. We have Israel. We have Spain. There is Austria, Australia, Estonia, and I should say that the governing organizations, they are pure patient organizations. That was the agreement, that within the governing organizations there will be only these patient-focused organizations. But we have a number of supporting organizations as well, extending the list of the countries also to Italy, Greece, or Canada. So please, next slide. I'll be not anymore trying to do it remotely. So the main goal is, or the first goal is to change UN single treaty to recognize medical cannabis. I'll do just a quick wrap up in history, where the name which I see is increasingly popular in US, Harry J. Esslinger, did in 1954 what I think can be called pedal to the metal, because previously there were already discussions in United Nations that there should be some international regulations of psychoactive substances, but then in 1994, Harry J. Was disappointed how the process is slow. Because in United Nations, each country needs to adopt by their legislation, or that was the original process. So in fact, he pushed on the United Nations to change this implementation process to speed up the international ban of medical cannabis, because before that, there was no cannabis involved in these international discussions. And since '54, it was added to the discussion table. And in 1961, it resulted in this single convention, which obliged all the member states to get very fast cannabis under scheduled psychoactive substances. Of course, in 1961, it could look like a good idea because there were no scientific knowledge and evidence on what a there was a lot of knowledge of evidence, but what we called evidence-based medicine, which was even popping up that time, there were no such documents. But now, in fact, more than 60 years later, it's other way around. There is so many evidence that resisting on these more than half a century years old international treaties really looks like one of the biggest paradox, making UN even harming their main principle, which is to support international good. And not just we as a medical cannabis patient, but also we as medical professionals or citizens are being in increased numbers convinced that it creates barriers and it harms the human rights and also human rights in biomedicine, which are one of the main documents or even backgrounds of the United Nations as such. And also we are seeing in many countries that governments, if they are being questioned to move ahead, they are not anymore using these arguments that but what will happen and the criminality and so on. They are simply saying, but there is this in the convention which is obliging us to keep this silly legislation be still valid. Yeah. The second goal is become official patient organization advisor to Global Commission on Drug Policy of United Nations. And here I can say we also succeed very quickly, because a week after the establishment of IMCPC, there was a meeting of this GCODP held in Vienna, which is like 4 hours drive from Prague. And Michael Kravitz and the other guys who were attending the IMCPC establishment and were planning to go to this conference, they did a great job there. They used the support of the allies. Michel Kazachkin, it's one of the legends of HIV and AIDS prevention and harm reduction programs. Also Ruth Dreyfus, Jim Gierch, or Pavel B., my respective colleague from Prague, who's member of Global Commission on Drugs and ex-Lord Major of Prague. So they succeed to, for the first time, get NGOs really involved in the UN nations discussions on the drug policy. And I'm sure that Michael and those of us who read the reports will be happy to share with you the details of how this flow. And I need to speed up to keep in time, please. One more. This is the Prague resolution we have sent to the UN guy for this UN Commission as a preparatory document for a UN General Assembly special session on drugs to be held in 2016, that they should really put as a first point of the agenda of this worldwide summit to either exclude cannabis from these UN conventions with no other actions, or create a special UN Convention of Cannabis, which should lead to a significant rescheduling of cannabis as such in these international treaties. And instead of conclusion, I can't resist to use once again this IMCPC typing, and maybe also to inspire you what it can mean to be a CPC, to really help patient advocates in other countries around the world to create patient advocacy organizations and build up on your experience and knowledge. Thank you very much.
So is there any question right now that wellness is winning? It's a pretty amazing panel. So can we give everyone another round of applause?